So good morning, dear Tay and dear Noble community. How's everybody doing? Okay. You don't sound so sure. How's everybody doing? Okay, I feel more at ease now. How many of you slept well? Okay. I celebrate and enjoy that. How many of you didn't sleep well? Aw, those of us who slept well, let's send some loving kindness to those who didn't sleep well. Yeah. I'm so excited to be sitting here with Sister Nghiem. The other day we were having a cup of tea together and we were talking about the wake-up retreat. And you shared with me that you were really excited about the wake-up retreat. So I'd like to ask you, what excites you about the wake-up retreat?
Well, you know, when I walked into the hall this morning, I was almost late. We're asked to come to the hall 5 minutes early, but I came like 3 minutes before it started. And I was quite surprised. There was no more seats left. On the sister side, I couldn't find a single cushion for myself. So I had to get a mat and put it in the back. And I thought I would be one of the last. And I was about to sit down, and then I saw 10 people, 20, 30 people continue to come into the hall. So I said, oh, okay, I cannot just sit down. So we had to get up and find you more chairs and cushions. And this has been going on for 3 years in a row. During the wake-up retreat, in no other retreat in Plum Village do we have to stand up and find so many chairs and cushions for you to do sitting meditation at 6:30 in the morning, and you had to walk down here at 5:30. So I was just getting in touch with the enthusiasm and the desire to practice in the young people now, and I think we have not caught up with the level of enthusiasm that is out there with the young people in terms of looking for spirituality and contemplative practice, a kind of practice for meditation. So I was just feeling quite happy sitting way in the back and just observing the whole hall as you were doing sitting meditation. And I got in touch with that, that deep desire to be able to touch something beautiful and to touch something that would be able to help us all to take care of ourselves and each other better. So I was just very moved this morning, and I felt a lot of hope for the young generation now. That's all.
Wonderful. This is like a reunion for us. We monastics are often in different centers and we don't have a chance to always practice together. So Sister Nghiem and I haven't had a chance to teach together for a very long time. So this is a great blessing. You know, the whole of Buddhism, and we're a Buddhist center, the whole of Buddhism is based on questions, good questions. And so often I like to play with my students and I ask them, what would you like me to teach about today? And often they're caught unawares. They'll say something like, just say whatever, it'll be okay. Or say something about mindfulness, that always works. And for me, I find that very interesting because for me, the kind of insight that arises, the kind of transformation that manifests in us is dependent on the kind of question that we ask. And many of us are actually afraid of touching that deep longing, that deep question in our heart. If I ask you, for example, what's the deepest question in your heart? If you could only ask one question for the whole of your life in order to transform your situation, the situation internally, the situation in our family, in our society, or in the world, what would that question be? For me, this is what's been in my mind when I consider the title of this retreat, Wake Up. Now, wake up's a very general term, isn't it? If we really look a little bit deeply, the other question that I think we need to be asking, and that I ask myself many times a day, is what is it I need to wake up to? What is it that I need to wake up to as an individual? What is it that my community needs to wake up to? that my nation needs to wake up to, and that we as humanity and all living beings need to wake up to. And to ask that question requires a certain kind of courage. But there's an even deeper sense of courage to be willing to open ourselves to the response that comes in our heart. Because often the response to that question, what is it I need to wake up to, is that part of ourselves that we've been not wanting to look at. The part that we're most afraid of. The edge of the envelope. So for us here in the Wake Up Retreat, I want to ask you to consider throughout the days that we're together, what is it that you need to wake up to? What's the concrete manifestation of that opening of the heart, of that stepping into the unknown, of that rediscovery that we're being invited into? In that way, these few days will be some of the most powerful days that we'll have individually and collectively. And I think that's the difference between religion and spirituality. If we're religious, there can often be a sense of passivity. But with spirituality, we're actively engaged. We're asking questions. We're pushing the edge. We're discovering things in a way that we haven't touched yet. And that's exciting. That's what I'm excited about. This morning, I had a similar experience to Sister Nghiem. Every moment's a moment to practice. I decided to enjoy some walking meditation. Sometimes nowadays there's this movement of forest bathing, of stepping into nature and enjoying the sound of the leaves and the smell of the damp earth. So I decided to enjoy some wonderful walking meditation down to my vehicle to come here. So I was just enjoying every step and feeling the beautiful breeze. And I finally arrived at the parking lot and there was no vehicle. And so, yeah, it was interesting because I thought, what will I do? And all of these different scenarios came up in my mind. Will I run down the hill? And I thought, no, I'm not going to run down the hill. It would be terrible to arrive at the hall and slide in and be panting and then talk about relaxation. And then I thought, should I borrow a bike? And I haven't ridden a bike for so many years. I don't know what will happen. The last time I rode a bike in Plum Village, I came down the hill from Upper Hamlet to Lower Hamlet. It didn't have brakes. I'll leave you to figure out what happened. It was a different kind of awakening experience. So that's definitely a question you need to ask. Does it have brakes? And so then I decided to just, well, there's nothing I can do. So I walked back slowly. I enjoyed every step. And then I arrived back at the monastic building, and suddenly I saw that there was a car there, and I made my way down. So I got here also at pretty much the last minute. As I was walking through the trees, though, I was remembering something that my teacher had shared with me a number of years ago when we were having tea. He said, Brother Phap, if you're really aware, there's nothing that's not a teaching. There's nothing that's not an opportunity to wake up. And as I was looking at those trees, I saw they're full right now of green leaves. They've had so much growth. They're lush, they're beautiful. A number of these trees I helped to plant, or I was here when they were planted 22, 23 years ago. Now they're very large, they're beautiful, and there's a lot of shade. And at the same time, even amongst all of those green leaves, there are some leaves that are starting to turn yellow and starting to look like they're going to fall from the branches. And so in some way, those trees, even with all of their growth, they have to let go. They have to let go in a sense of how they define themselves, how they see themselves. They have to let go of all of that growth of this year in order to let the growth of next year come in. And for me, that's one of the greatest gifts of spirituality. That's one of the greatest gifts of mindfulness. That it helps us to relearn, to rediscover, to re-experience all those things that we think we know already. We think we know what it is to breathe. We think we know what it is to walk. We think we know at the age that we are, up to about 35, we think we know what it is to speak to another person. We think we know who they are or who we are. But as we develop this capacity that we call mindfulness, which we'll speak about a little, we begin to understand that we really don't understand anything at all. That we've just begun. And we begin again and again and again with every step, with every breath, with each moment. Do I really understand who I am in this moment? Do I really understand who you are in this moment? What is this thing that I call breathing, or this thing that I call walking? And if we can bring that kind of attention to each moment, there's always something new to discover. But it takes also a lot of courage to let go of all of those notions, those ideas that we carry. They're a great protection. Here in Plum Village, we practice engaged Buddhism or engaged spirituality. Many of us here in this room are activists. And so engaged Buddhism, in one sense, came out of our teacher's insight in the middle of the war in Vietnam, that beautiful qualities were being developed in the meditation hall. And at the same time, bombs were falling outside. People were being killed, families being separated, the earth was being ravaged. And so in a sense, there was this understanding that it felt narcissistic to sit in the meditation hall while the world is burning outside. So there was this movement to bring these insights of meditation, of centeredness, of peace, right into the heart of the very difficult situation. And so for many of us, we see the activism that's going on, we see the situation of the world, which is literally burning. And at the same time, we also are burning as well. So many of us are tired, exhausted, burnt out. And so while engaged Buddhism or engaged practice is definitely rooted in social action, it's also rooted in a sense of engaging with each moment of our daily life as our practice. This helps us to build resilience because we cannot very often in our life choose our circumstances. Some of us in this room are in very desperate and difficult circumstances. But the freedom we have, sometimes the only freedom we have as human beings, is to choose our response, to choose the way we respond. And so when we're here in Plum Village, we have an opportunity to walk in such a way, to breathe in such a way, to sit in such a way, to eat in such a way, that whatever we want to touch, whether it's peace, happiness, joy, be available for us right in that moment. And this is to give us tools to be able to engage in social action in a way that doesn't burn us out and burn those around us out. To heal the earth outside at the same time as cultivating the earth inside. Why don't we enjoy a sound of the bell? There's a story of one of the great spiritual teachers of our own lineage who had a student who came to them and was telling this teacher about miracles of walking on water and walking in the air. And this spiritual teacher, Master Rinzai, said, "That's not a miracle. Anyone can do that. Anyone can walk on water. Anyone can walk on the air. The real miracle is to be able to walk on the earth." So here, of course, he was speaking about walking on the earth. And to be honest, let's face it, how many of us when we're walking are actually inhabiting fully each step? We're usually walking in the realm of our ideas, or where we need to be next, or where we've just been. So that's already a miracle. So that's one level of understanding this. To be able to inhabit our lives, to not be divided anymore. But another level of this is to understand that we want to walk on our lived experience. We want to walk not in the realm of ideas, but we want to walk. We want to bring forth that which is within us. Bring forth our whole being to our spiritual practice. We talk in our tradition not about transcendence, about floating above anger, about floating above despair, about floating above depression, but about transforming those aspects. And this requires being a good gardener of the earth inside and the earth outside. How do we take care of those things that we think we need to get rid of? This is the ground from which our understanding and our transformation will manifest. One of the qualities of our practice is encapsulated in a word that we use often in Plum Village. It's called arriving. And I always remember back in the year 2000, I was asked to travel from Plum Village. At that time I was living here. I was asked to travel to Australia to help to facilitate retreats. And so we in Plum Village always buy the cheapest ticket that is possible. So we traveled from Bordeaux to Paris, and we had 6 hours in the airport in Paris, which if you've ever been to Charles de Gaulle, you know what I mean. And then, so we got on the, we got on the plane from Paris, and we flew to Dubai, and we were in the airport in Dubai for a number of hours. And then we flew to Ho Chi Minh City, to Saigon. And we were locked in the airport in Saigon for 10 hours. We had the cement floor to lie down on. At that time, they were renovating the airport. And we listened to Vietnamese opera for 10 hours. It was playing. That was a special experience. And then we flew to Sydney, so it was another 9 hours in the plane. So by the time we arrived at the place that we were staying, the temple we were staying, it was about 40-something hours of continual travel. I will never forget walking up the stairs of the place that we were staying. I was carrying 2 suitcases, and those suitcases were so heavy as I walked up those stairs. And as I stepped into the room that I was staying, I put down those suitcases, and without any thought at all, I simply went, ah. I felt amazing. I was finally at my destination after those 2 days of continual travel, different countries, different time zones, and a whole lot of airline food. I'd finally arrived at my outer destination. Without any thought, there was no thought of like, okay, let me relax everything, but it was a spontaneous reaction of this sense of ah. Later I was doing sitting meditation, and I realized that the seed syllable, the core of the word arriving, which is the heart of the Plum Village practice, is this sound ah. And it's one of the most beautiful and natural sounds that we can make. When you make the sound ah, you just completely, let's do it together and see how it feels. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Ah. Isn't it beautiful? And all of us in every moment, we may not be carrying suitcases, physical suitcases, but we're carrying a lot of baggage. Our resentment, our anger, our depression, our expectations, all of these things we're carrying. Can we walk in such a way, breathe in such a way, eat in such a way, that every moment of this time together, we experience this sense of ah. If we're able to do that, then we are truly practicing. My teacher says that we know that we're practicing well if we experience already that which we're looking for each and every moment. And the secret to that is being able in every moment to identify what we're carrying and to put it down. To put it down. And one of the ways that we recognize that is this quality that we call mindfulness. Mindfulness is the English translation of the Pali word sati, or in Sanskrit is smrti. And funnily enough, mindfulness was first used in the English language in the 1860s, and it was proposed as a translation for the word sati by an Anglican pastor, by a Catholic minister, a Christian minister. And it's important to understand this because often we're experiencing things through translation. In English, we use the word mindfulness, and we have certain concepts about what mind is, which are quite different from the original understanding, at least in the Buddhist terms, of what mind is. Usually, if we ask people nowadays to point to our mind, we'll point here. We say here. If I pointed here, you'd think I was a little strange, and you might lock me up for 3 days. However, I find that the translation into French is much better, full awareness, rather than mindfulness. Mindfulness is not an intellectual activity, an intellectual kind of concentration. Rather, it's an embodiment. Our bodies are great teachers. And let's do an experiment. I think often we can convey something very concisely through our body. Let us imagine that we are in a classroom. We haven't studied for, we're doing calculus or something like that. We haven't studied at all, and there's a pop quiz. So why don't we all close our eyes and imagine that you haven't studied for this pop quiz. I'm the teacher. And then you imagine that I put up something like an equation on the board, and I ask you to come and solve it. And I call out your name. And then you call out in your mind, who, me? And then point to yourself. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Who, me? Let's point to ourselves. Okay, where are you pointing? How many of you are pointing here? Nobody. Okay, that's reassuring. I'm really happy about that. How many of us are pointing here? Very few of us. Instinctively, our body knows that the core of our being is here. The seat of our being is here. Mindfulness means to embody ourselves, to live from the center of our being. In the Vedic philosophy of the Buddha's time, now we might have a different sense of this today, but I think it's helpful medicine. In the Vedic philosophy of the Buddha's time, the seat of consciousness was not seen to be the brain, as it would be today, but it was seen to be the heart. Simply because if the heart stopped beating, then, things are kind of over in the usual sense. Nowadays, if you learn a little bit about the heart, you know it consists of 60% neural cells. And consciousness, as we know nowadays, exists in all different parts of our body. It's equally valid and good medicine for us. If we speak English and we have the concept, this separation between mind and body, to consider mindfulness practice in terms of heartfulness, of this embodiment, of coming down from above our ears, where we normally live, into our lived experience. And one of the characteristics of mindfulness, when we generate this relaxed attention, this relaxed awareness to what's taking place within us and around us, is that we start to notice the difference between the stories we tell, the interpretations that we have of things, and our bare experience, our lived experience. And while we learn to love the story, the interpretation we tell, we can learn a lot from that. We start to be able to touch more and more our bare experience of this moment. Often we live in the realm of ideas, and mindfulness helps us to be able to touch reality, to touch things as they are, rather than our idea. And so through this retreat, I invite you also, as we learn from Sister Nghiem some of the concrete practices of developing this energy of full awareness, of heartfulness, of presence, to be able to ask yourself, am I in contact with my bare lived experience in this moment, or with am I telling myself a story about it, interpreting, separating myself out in some way? A few years ago, it was about 10 years ago now, I was with Brother Phap in Brazil. And I'll tell this story because it's a little humbling, and we've all had these moments. We were facilitating a day of mindfulness in the park in the center of Rio. It was a park where people walked their dogs quite a lot. And so we enjoyed that day of mindfulness so much. We were doing walking meditation first with the Sangha and the participants. And then we came and we sat together and we had a Dharma talk. As we sat down for the Dharma talk, I had a translator there. She was an amazing Tibetan nun who spoke Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese, so she was translating for me. As I was giving this talk, suddenly I began to smell something. It began to come into my awareness that there was a strong smell of dog poop as I was there. And so I noticed in that moment, half of my mind was giving the talk, and half of my mind was thinking, where is that smell coming from? And so, can I do it out of compassion for all beings? Sister Nghiem will stand in for our sister from Brazil. So I would look over to our sister who is translating, and every time I looked at her, she would smile this beautiful smile, just a lovely smile every time I looked at her. And every time I looked, the smell would become stronger, this direction. And so I continued giving the talk, but part of my mind was telling all of these stories as I looked at her, like, wow, how come she's not noticing this? Why is she not, how could she be here? And she'd stepped in this and she hadn't cleaned her shoes and all these things, and here she is with the Dharma talk, and it's distracting me and all of these things. And every time I would look at her, the smile would become bigger. So I gave this talk, and then after the talk was over, it was time for us to go back to the apartment. And we stepped into the car that was taking us back to the apartment, and funnily enough, that smell followed me. And I decided to look down on the bottom of my right-hand shoe, and I noticed that actually it was me all along. It was me all along. I was the one who had this dog poop smell, and here I had all this story about the person, our beautiful sister over here, but it was me. And so to a greater or lesser extent, we co-create what we call reality. There are a few hundred of us in this room, and yet we're quite sure that the way we're experiencing this moment is the way that everybody else is experiencing this moment. It's not true. Each of us, while we share a common kind of space, we've all come into this hall, each of us is experiencing this moment quite differently. In fact, this afternoon when we have Dharma sharing and we share about what we talked about this morning, you'll notice that everyone will hear completely different things. Some of us, if you come from Australia like me, maybe you need to wear 1, 2, 3, 4 layers to feel warm enough. For some of us who are from Finland, my brother over here is from Finland, you just need a t-shirt and shorts. Who's right and who's wrong? So when we talk about the moment, there's so much more than what we think is reality in this moment. And so mindfulness helps us to be able to ask the question, am I sure? And if we ask ourselves that question deeply, the answer is always, I'm not sure. There's always more to discover. So Sister Nghiem will share with us some concrete ways of generating this energy of heartfulness throughout this retreat.
I'm trying to see how I can translate everything Brother Phap has said into your lived experience this week, and how we can help you with that. I love the theme of this retreat, like Brother Phap and so many brothers and sisters here. We all really love the theme of the retreat, wake up, and the other part is earth retreat, wake up, earth retreat. And I realize there's a growing need, growing desire to really do something for the earth, to take care of the earth. And I was sitting here and I was asking myself, so how can we take care? How can we begin to care for something? How can we begin to love something when we don't have a relationship with it? I think, so the first thing for me is when I want to learn how to take care of something, whether it's myself, my loved ones, my family, my friends, or the earth, I need to see clearly the kind of relationship I have with the object of my love, whether that is myself, my loved ones, or the earth. So I think, what kind of relationship do we have with ourselves now? We have to ask ourselves these questions during this retreat. What's the nature of our relationship with our loved ones now? What's the nature of our relationship with the earth? And to be able to discover that nature, that relationship that we have, whether it's with ourselves or our loved ones or the earth, first and foremost, we have to be there. We have to be able to recognize, be present, to recognize what is there. And here in Plum Village, we have of course, we offer the practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness is not just a concept, an energy, but it's always mindfulness of something. It's an energy that will help you to recognize what is going on in the present moment. So it's not, you can never say, oh, I'm mindful, right? It doesn't make sense. It's always, what are you mindful of? You're mindful of what? So when we want to cultivate the energy of mindfulness, we have to cultivate it in terms of the object that is right there in front of us. For instance, if when we are listening to the sound of the bell, and we know that we are listening to the sound of the bell, that is mindfulness of listening to the bell. And here in Plum Village, our practice of listening to the bell is that whether it's this bell here in the big meditation hall, or the activity bells outside, or the clock in the dining hall, or even your telephone, the practice is that when you hear the sound of the bell, you simply come home to yourself, listen to the bell, come home to ourselves. And what do we mean by coming home to ourselves? What we mean is we bring the mind back to the body. And the touch point for that is our breathing, because the breathing is a part of our body. And when we can bring our attention back to the breathing, we are bringing the mind home to the body. It's a very simple practice. It's a very easy practice to do as well, and it's very enjoyable. So listening to the bell, you stop what you're doing, whether you are moving, walking, chopping vegetables, washing your dishes, talking, thinking. You just stop what you're doing, and you simply bring your attention back to your breathing. And you pay attention to the quality of your breathing. How's your breathing at that moment? Am I breathing in a relaxed way? What's the quality of my breathing? Am I panting? Am I breathing deeply? Just to pay attention to the quality of your breathing and feel your breathing as it is coming in of your body and exiting your body. And we don't have to force it. One of the wonderful things about the Plum Village practices is that it's, you can say it's zero effort or minimal. I don't know. You might discover for yourself how much effort it takes. But we would like to practice in such a way that there's ease in the practice. And so as you are coming back to the breathing, when you hear the sound of the bell, any bell, as we're coming back to the breathing, we just feel the breathing. Pay attention to the breathing. We don't force the breathing, and we allow it to be. We just pay attention to the breathing as it is, naturally, coming in and out of our body. And this sounds very simple to do, but maybe we can have a litmus test. We can do a litmus test. Brother Phap, you mentioned earlier, how much do we know how to breathe? Do we really know how to breathe? We may have many different ideas about breathing. Do we know how to breathe? Do we know a lot about our breathing, or the nature of our breathing, the quality of our breathing? So perhaps my sister can invite one sound of the bell, and we'll just do a little litmus test. And you just come back to your breathing, allow it to be as it is, and you just feel. Feel the breathing coming in and out of your body. If there's thinking in your mind, you just bring it back to the breathing and feel the breathing happening. As we are feeling the breathing happening, we are also at the same time calming our thinking mind. Because the mind, when the object is the breathing, then it doesn't have to think about other things. So we listen to one sound of the bell and just pay attention to our breathing. Allowing it to be as it is, and we just feel. This is a very simple practice, but at the same time, very important for us to learn how to master. Because most of us, we're too used to striving. We're used to accomplishing something. We're used to doing something for the sake of something else. We're used to we're not used to allowing ourselves to just be. We're not used to allowing ourselves to just be ourselves as we are, who we are. And coming back to your breathing, just allowing your breathing to be. If you're able to do that, just be with your breathing as it is. There's no effort. We don't have to force it. We don't have to force it to be anything other than it is. It's the beginning of your training to be with yourself as you are. Just allowing yourself to be who you are at this moment. Do we need to become a president? Do we need to make an additional 5,000 per month? Do we need to become a famous activist? Do we need to take some kind of strong action to heal Mother Earth? We have so many ideas and expectations about ourselves. So we have to also train ourselves to come back. First of all, recognize what's going on in ourselves. what are we? Who are we at this moment? How are we at this moment? So learning to recognize, coming home to the breathing, training ourselves to bring the mind home to the breathing, just observing it as it is. Learn to be with your breathing first and foremost, as it is. And then slowly we also learn how to be with ourselves as we are. And in the process of just allowing things, coming home to things as they are, observing things as they are, a kind of understanding can happen. As we're coming back to our breathing, the first understanding that can happen is that we realize we're alive. How can we breathe if we're not alive? That's a very important, miraculous awakening to have. Come back to your breathing and know, I'm alive. It's a miracle to be alive. It's wonderful to be alive. And another kind of understanding that we can have is that my breathing right now, it's so wonderful not just to be alive, but to be able to breathe like this, free and unobstructed from mucus or, if you have allergies, then you would know the suffering of not being able to breathe freely. Or if you have some kind of pulmonary disorder, you see the breathing, just being able to take a breath that comes in and out as freely as it does right now. It's a wonder, it's a miracle, and it's a condition of happiness. And we have so many conditions of happiness like that available to us at this very moment. So the second understanding that you can have while just coming back and observing your breathing as it is like that. I'm alive. How wonderful it is to just be able to breathe like this. In this moment, I don't have a cold. I don't have a disease that will prevent me from breathing freely. And as you're breathing like that, you may also notice that the breath that you're taking at this moment, it doesn't belong to you. It's not yours alone. Each breath that you're taking now in this meditation hall is a shared breath. Each breath that you take, you are taking it at the same time with the participation of everyone in this room. We're all sharing this same air. As we're breathing, each breath that we're taking is a shared breath. And this shared breath is not just with everyone in this room. Look outside, you're sharing it with the trees. Not just with the trees, you're sharing it with Mother Earth. Each breath that you're taking is a shared breath with everything that is around you, with Mother Earth, with the cosmos. So you come back to the breathing, just observing it as it is. We can already have a lot of insights, let alone when we come back to ourselves, our feelings, our thoughts, our mental formations, our perceptions. We can also begin to have a lot of insights, a lot of awakening. But the first step, the touch point, is that we have to be able to bring the mind home to the body. How can we begin to understand what is going on for ourselves, for others around us, for Mother Earth, if we don't know how to come home to the present moment? If we can't observe truly what is going on inside and around us, we can't begin to take action without that understanding. With understanding, we can take action that is loving, careful, and inclusive. Yeah. So the bells, we stop listening to the bell, we stop, come back to our breathing. Throughout the retreat, train yourself to come back to your breathing. We don't have to engage in thinking all the time. It's not that I'm saying thinking is bad. I love to think myself as well. I think thinking can be wonderful. And one of the misperceptions in when people are looking for a practice in meditation is that you think that you have to arrive at this state where there's no thinking, nothing. That's not exactly the point. The point is how to engage in the kind of thinking that is helpful, that is conducive to healing, that is conducive to peace, to connection, to reconciliation. And if you're thinking, the kind of thinking that you're engaging in at the moment is leading you to become more angry, or making you become more get deeper into your despair or your frustration or your separation with another person, we have to reevaluate that kind of thinking, because it's not in line with right thinking. Right thinking is a kind of thinking that is conducive to healing, and a wonderful practice that can help us to, a wonderful mantra that can help us with our thinking is what Brother Phap had shared. When we're thinking something, am I sure? Am I sure that this is correct? Am I sure? And the best is to let go and to come back to the present moment. Touch down on the present moment. First of all, with your breathing, with what's going on. The breathing is only the beginning, huh? That's only one part of our body, but it's a wonderful, wonderful way to help us to calm down our thinking and to immediately bring our attention back to the present moment. Also because the breathing is always available to us, so we can always have it at hand to calm our minds as a way to generate calm and peace for ourselves. This is a very important training to engage in, to be able to have the capacity to bring peace to yourself at any moment that you wish, simply by going back to the breathing. So we have it's 11. Okay. Walking is the same. Eating is the same. But Brother Phap can tell us a little bit more. Okay.
So as Sister Nghiem so beautifully shared with us, the basis of everything we do here in Plum Village is following our mindful breath, of coming back to our breathing. If you don't know what to do in a particular moment, just come back to your breathing, and that's perfect. Everything's great. So it's really the basis of everything we do here in Plum Village, whether it's sitting meditation, walking meditation, eating meditation, and so on. This coming back to the physical sensation, not the idea or the visualization or any other thing of our breath, but the physical sensation of our breath, wherever we feel it most in our body, the tip of our nose, our palate, the back of our throat, somewhere down to our abdomen rising and falling. I believe after this orientation session, we'll have an opportunity to have a workshop on sitting meditation, which will be a beautiful experience on how to bring this awareness of the physical sensation of our breath into our practice of sitting meditation. In Plum Village, we have no such thing as waiting for anything. Every moment is an opportunity to practice. And one of the great opportunities to practice and to see the way that our mind works is lining up. So we'll have a chance to line up quite a number of times, whether it's going to the bathroom or having meals. Today we'll have a meal together in our family, and our family group leader will share with us some concrete practices of eating meditation. Today in this orientation, I just want to mention about the practice of lining up. Because it's a really concrete moment when we can get in contact with the stories that we tell ourselves, the way that our mind works. So when we're lining up, this is a powerful practice. Maybe we're standing there and we think, why did I get into this line? The other line is moving faster, poor me, poor me. Or especially when we come to meals, we'll stand and we'll actually line up in silence. This is a powerful practice because often we believe that we can only communicate when we speak to each other with words. And many of us are deeply uncomfortable with being in silence. Maybe I just have a quirky kind of mind, but I believe we're uncomfortable in silence because it is much more intimate than when we're speaking. When we just catch another person's eyes, and we have that moment of connection. There's no talking about the weather, about politics or telling jokes or something. You're just you in that moment, fully alive, and I'm myself in that moment, fully alive. If you've ever done that experience as a child, where you sit in silence for 2 minutes and just look at another person, you know that that can be excruciating. And so I really believe that when we're standing in line, one of the most powerful things we can do is to stand in silence together, to really bear witness to our own lived experience in that moment, our vulnerability, our pain, our joy, and to be present with another person just as they are, to not demand anything of another person, but if our eyes meet, to have that moment of connection. How powerful is that? And yes, the other line is always going to move more quickly. And some of us might have the strategy of trying to jump over and move over, but I invite you to observe all of those tendencies. Now, we'll learn more about the practice of eating meditation from our family group leaders, but I just want to mention a couple of things. When we come to eating meditation, we'll have 3 meals today, which is a great blessing. When we line up, we'll experience many things, and a lot of us have some strong habit energies around eating, about being nourished and about scarcity and abundance. And we all have our strategies. Maybe we'll notice in ourselves or in others, maybe some people will come to the serving table first and make it look like they're not really looking, but they'll kind of like look and see which dishes that we want to have, and we plan it all out. Or we kind of feel like, oh, I don't want to stand in line too much, so we come to the dining hall or the tables about 5 to 10 minutes early so we can be there early. We don't have to get behind all the slow people. But if we do get behind all the slow people, what a great chance to see what stories come up. We might say things like, oh, that's the only good dish on the table. She's taking so much. There's not going to be enough for me. Why did I get in this line? What a great chance to smile to it, to come back and to recognize this is something really concrete. And ask ourselves, why did that come up? Sooner, if you're in the other line, or later, if you're in my line, you will arrive at the place where the plates and bowls are. And we monastics have a practice that I'd like to invite you to do. When you come to the place where the plates and bowls are, I invite you to take a moment to just join your palms and to bow to the empty bowl, the empty plate. In recognition that the opportunity to have a meal 3 times a day is a great blessing. That people, even in this area, not everybody has that opportunity. And some of us have come from places in our daily life where we may not have the opportunity to have 3 meals a day. And so we take the food in that spirit. We take what we need for our body, which is sometimes different to what we want. So I invite you, as you go along the serving table, just to check in physically with what your body wants in that moment, and take what you're sure you can finish. You can always come back later for seconds. So it can be a very powerful practice of learning what it is to nourish ourselves. We're aware of the food, and we're also aware, as I shared a moment ago, of the community that's around us. Both of those things are sources of nourishment. Finally, before I pass to Sister Nghiem to bring us to a close and to share about noble silence, I want to invite you to consider something radical, and that's to consider a technological sabbatical while you're here. We have become habituated to being kind of far distant observers of our life rather than participants. This is a rare chance for us to actually inhabit our bodies, to inhabit our lives. There's this saying that if it's not on the gram, it didn't happen. If it's not on Instagram, it didn't happen. But I think we're all here, you know, it's happening, it's all good. If you don't post an update 3 or 4 times a day, it's fine. Like, maybe it's social suicide, but who cares? Who told us that that's the way to live? I was guiding sitting meditation. I have a sitting meditation class that I offer in Deer Park, and I was sitting at the bell, and as I was guiding the sitting meditation, I happened to look around, and there was a young guy who was sitting there, and he had a selfie stick, and he had the... And I thought, what can he be doing? He's taking a photo of himself to say, I'm doing sitting meditation, like cultivating mindfulness in Deer Park. Like, you know, like, no, you're not. Like, you're not. So I invite you, while you're here, to notice this tendency we have all the time whenever there's a spare moment to reach for our device. We've never been more technologically connected in history than we are right now, but we've never been more disconnected from our own bodies and from who's actually in the room, each other, than we are now. So to notice this habitual tendency we have to fill up any moment with technology and experiment a little bit, see what it is, to smile to it, to let go of that, and to come back, see what happens. That can be really scary, but it can also be a great path of discovery. So good luck. Good luck. Sister.
So every evening we also have an opportunity to practice what we call noble silence. What time is it start? At 9:30? Okay. No. So we have what we call the practice of noble silence. And noble silence starts from 9:30 in the evening until after we wash our dishes after breakfast the next day. And it's a chance for us to practice again, coming back to ourselves and hearing what is going on. And during this period, we provide each other with, we co-create an environment of silence for each other. For many of us, we are maybe in the environment that we are in at home. I know in my own home, the talking doesn't stop until I just get in bed and pull the covers over, and then people stop talking to me, or I stop talking to everyone. But here, we want to have this period of noble silence from 9:30 till after washing dishes the next day. And it's for us to really come back and to hear. The silence outside is there for us to hear all of the voices inside, the conversations that we have inside, the noise inside. And also it's a wonderful chance to practice a kind of, I guess, sound detox. Sound detox. And it's a wonderful way to kind of be a soundscapist. Sound, landscaper, soundscaper. Is that it? Yeah. We can create this landscape, this soundscape for everyone to be able to come home to ourselves and just allow ourselves a chance to hear what is going on. And some of us, we can use that time to kind of allow what has come up for us during the day and to come up. We can have a chance to be with it, be more fully with it, rather than continuing our conversation with someone else about the same subject. we can allow it to come up in us and to really hear. When I was at Blue Cliff one time, we had a journalist who came to visit us and to follow us on one of the tours. And he came at 11 o'clock at nighttime. So he came from the city, and he also lived in Saigon, so it's quite busy. And I didn't see him that night, but I saw him the next day around lunchtime. And he said last night was the scariest night he'd ever spent in his entire life, in anywhere. And he said he realized this was quite a safe place, but it was just the no noise. It was so scary for him, because it was the first time that he had been exposed to an environment that was really that quiet. There was no noise, no cars coming by, passing by, no music being played, no one talking. And even it continued when he woke up the next day through breakfast, etc. And he was just extremely scared of this silence. And he said, and I asked him, well, why were you so scared? And he said, because it was the first time that I could feel my fear, that I heard the fears that I had inside. So this noble silence time is quite critical for our practice this week. Allow yourself to hear yourself. There's so many concerns that you've had before coming here, even while you're here. There may be pain inside. There may be stories that you have been repeating over and over to yourself, and they may come up here. And we can practice by just being with it. And we can also practice by learning how to embrace it with our breathing, again with our breathing. If we are not strong enough to really process it at that time, we can take refuge in our breathing to just embrace it. We don't have to solve it. We don't have to come up with any solutions. We allow ourselves to listen to what's going on inside of ourselves. And just as we practice with the breathing, being with the breathing, and eventually it finds a way to calm itself down, the same with the fears, the thinking, the difficulties that we have that surfaces during this noble silence time. The only thing is we have to allow ourselves to be present for it. So we have quite some time before we go to bed, and then the next morning to just be with ourselves. It's a wonderful opportunity. And that's what we call noble silence. So during that time, we avoid talking to each other. If we need to speak to another person, and in this spirit of soundscaping, if we should need to speak to another person, we can write a note or we can whisper. But to be aware that when we choose to engage in conversation with another person, we're also asking them not to engage with the conversation inside. Yeah. So we can all support each other to practice noble silence every evening. Good luck, and may you hear yourself more clearly. Brother Phap, hi. Maybe the working meditation, I think your families, your working families can share. The facilitators in your family can also share about the spirit of working meditation here. We also do it with the spirit of ease, arriving, and being mindful of the movements. Also being mindful of the miracle of movement. Yeah. And I wanted to ask Brother Phap if we could close it with a question for him. He said earlier that he came here 23 years ago, and he came in his early 20s. Can you guess how old he is?
That's why I'm 70.
He's not a wake-upper. But I was curious, brother. You came 20-something years ago, and back then I know Plum Village wasn't so accessible. It was very difficult to find Plum Village. We're nowhere on the map. There's no internet. The phone, good luck calling. You know, everybody breathes like 100 times before they walk slowly to the phone, and you've given up many times before you realize. So if you're lucky to call 5 times consecutively, then the person has reached the phone. So it was very difficult to find our way to Plum Village, and the phone was the only way to contact Plum Village. And with having no one answer, it was even that much more challenging. So I was wondering, though, you know, since it wasn't so publicized, wasn't so popular, and also what made you look for Plum Village? What brought you to Plum Village? Because I'm curious, because he was of the age that many of you are now. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about his spiritual journey, how he made it to Plum Village. What was important to him? What were you looking for? And why did you stay? And yeah, it's a miracle. He's been here 23 years.
So just for the record, Sister Nghiem is a little older than... She looks a lot younger, but she's actually a little older. Is that right? What year were you born in? I'm also aware, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I'm also aware that we were sharing for an hour, and our coordinators wanted us to begin service meditation at 11. It's now 11:22. So briefly, I wanted to understand my life deeply. And even at that age, I recognized that I was doing the same things over and over, and society was doing the same things over and over and over again. And nothing was changing. So for me, I wanted to do something that was against the stream. I wanted to do something that was radical. And for me, it wasn't that I sat down one day and said, right, okay, the way for me to be radical is to be a monk. Although when you think about it, it is kind of radical. I mean, we live really simply. The only choice we have in the morning is, which shade of brown should I wear? Like, that's basically it. It's very simple. We live a community where, in that kind of sense, we're really countercultural. We do everything together, rather than this cult of personality, this thinking that I always need more. We're always looking to see, do I really need that? Can I make do with less? What's my relationship with the earth around? So for me, that really attracted me. For me, it's still something that nourishes me. So I wanted to live in a way that I was living in community. I was being invited constantly to inhabit my body and to make change in a real and sustainable way. And I guess that's kind of the foundation of where I was at the time. And at the same moment, looking back from this perspective, 23 years later, I have a lot of compassion for that young person, the idealism, everything that the young person who came here to Plum Village had. And I think the more important question is not why I came to Plum Village, or why I became a monk, or in our case, why we became activists, things like that. The question that's more important is, why am I still a monastic? Or why am I still an activist? What's my relationship to that now? Otherwise, you're living an experience that's decades old. If we only have that aspiration from 23 years ago, or 2 weeks ago, or 6 years ago, it's gone. We're a different person now. So what's our commitment? What's our relationship to our aspiration here and now? How have we changed? How is it changing? How am I showing up for it and examining it and becoming curious about it in each and every moment, so that it's something alive? It's not something dead that I feel that I have to do, but it's something that really is my path, and that path is something that's always unfolding. So if you want to know more, like some of the details, the juicy details and things like that, where I think all of the monastics are very happy, particularly Sister Nghiem, to share the juicy details of our personal histories and things in the context of Dharma sharing, and she would love that. What's the name of your family? Enjoy the rest of your retreat, everybody. We're so happy that you're here.